Maybe it was the internet blipping off because of like electricity or something.
I mean, it's basically stopped raining, but
It's not rain. Rain wouldn't cause that. It would be like some kind of a power surge or something. This is screwed up.
hopefully we don't have a power outage.
No, I don't know what that was about.
If we
That's
have a
something
power outage,
messed up.
I would go and snuggle with Auto. There's one right here.
Screwed up. Hmm. That was a very different kind of crash, though. Very different. It was like instant. Hmm. All right. Well, if you're back, welcome back. I don't know what happened. That was a weird one. So usually I get a notification and then there's like 15 to 30 seconds, but I got no notification. Everything just stopped like all at once. So that was very different than what normally happens. I apologize. Not what you want to have happen, but it happened. So I'm going to commit to about an hour here because I got to go after that. But I'm looking at 9:45/10:45 as about that kind of window. I think this early hour or so is really important. We'll see where we go from there. If within the first hour we don't start seeing that reversal, I think we might be in a bit of a sour spot today. So SPY's certainly got that going for it, that candle going for it right now on the 4 hour. And we'll see how that pans out. But this is the 4 hour, right? It's not even close to done. It just looks strong right at the moment. Being bought up. There was a request and it's gone now, so if you need to post it again, feel free to post it again. Honestly, this looks like kind of a nothing burger right now, but I think that, like I said, about an hour in. Okay, LO. All right. Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just stopped. Like, it wasn't even like a... It's very unusual. That doesn't normally happen. Actually, I don't think it's ever happened. It's like, I'm trying to think back if there's ever been just like an abrupt stop too. I don't think there has. Not like that. So like normally, like if it stops, it starts breaking down, and then there's an alert on, YouTube. No. No. There's an alert on YouTube, and there's a about 15 to 30. Well, maybe longer than that. It usually takes a while. Yeah, it is. This is a long-term trade, so yes, it's got cup and handle vibes for sure. It's a pretty weird, like low handle. Like it doesn't really, or excuse me, shallow handle. It doesn't really come very deep, which is kind of unusual. All right. Yeah, it's not that complex though. If it is a cup and handle, it's a pretty simple read. Normally with a cup and handle, you get a lot of selling on the left, which we have right here, and you get a lot of buying on the right, which we have right here. And then it has to usually take at least 8 weeks. The longer the better. So this is a nice long-term one. That's another thing that don't like about find something else to do. There's another thing I don't like about the cup and handle patterns is people often think they're really short term and they're just not. They're not supposed to be short term. So yeah. Anyways, we can probably figure this out pretty quick. Let's take a look. All right. So there's a parallel structure here. It's kind of obvious right there. So there's a bit of a trend. Let's use that one. And then probably this one. Yeah. All right. So what I'm going to try to do real quick is drive out the middle. I think that was probably what I wanted right there, but it was pretty close to where I was thinking it was going to be. It may even just be directly from the back. It looks like it is. So this is a really clean setup. Really, really clean. So in a cup and handle, technically it could move the full distance, but usually you still do a percentage meeting target. And I can't remember the number. You could do the full distance, but that Bolkowski has a better one that's more often hit. It's a stronger read on it. So there's a lot of people that will say you just measure the whole bowl and do that from the bottom. And in his, you still do a percentage meeting target. So you still do the A to B, and then you multiply by the percentage meeting, and you measure from the breakout point. So 61%. So that's easy. It's a 618. So I usually just use the fib then. So we'll do this. And I did it upside down, so we'll just do it from here. So this has a pretty strong suggestion that this could go all the way up to 125. Which, again, it may seem a little bit much, but the cup and handle breakout is a really strong one, especially if it's long term. Does not tell you timing wise, what may happen, but this has a pretty strong performance rating too. It's 3 out of 39, where 1 is the best, which is really high. And that's out of 913 trades. 1 week minimum for the handle. Oh, that's got that, I think. Barely. So this is a good place to put a stop. So he was saying right here at 46. So if you were trading it, that'd be a good place to do that. Yep, this is a big move. It may end up being similar to that, but it's essentially a 618 extension on it to some degree, of the total distance. So what I would suggest is that this middle usually is what I would look for. So if I were using like a wave, I would suggest that the middle is more likely than anything else. So this to me is probably correct. I just doodled that like really fast, but it actually looks right. So something like that. That looks pretty close to accurate. So perhaps by July 11th, I mean, that's that same tariff deadline. That's really, really close. That's a big move. So I'm not sure if it's going to make that, but that's 100% in about a month. But then again, this ran really far here too. I mean, this has had some pretty huge legs up. That was 200%, 250%. What is OKLO? What is this even about? Not sure. Yeah, I mean, at this venture, is it worth buying into right this second? I don't know. Maybe not. I think this could have a retest of the top, so you never know. It doesn't have to come all the way back down. This is a tricky one because there's some pretty clear jumps that were already made, so it may not come as low as expected. I would have to look really carefully at some other things to see if I can figure out where that needs to be. I don't think it looks like anything right now. It more bad than good, I guess, because of where it is, but I wouldn't say it's like horrible. Yeah, so this has the potential to run from roughly where we are to about July at almost 100% clip. So that's a big move. Big move. That's a really simple pattern too. It's a good breakout pattern. I'm not seeing anything wrong with it. I mean, it's easy for me to try to doubt stuff because it just is, but I don't see anything particularly bad about this one. So looks good to me. I might get an option just because that's a good setup. But I do think, I'm not looking at any indication. Yeah. It's kind of like everything else. This might have a need for some serious correction. And I'm not really liking that, but I'm not really liking that because, again, it looks a bit divergent. So this is going to have to run really far in order to kind of disprove that divergence. But I'm thinking that is the wave right there. So 1, 2, and then we'd have to have maybe a 3, 4 on the other side. Yeah, that seems about right. So probable time to hit the top is around the 11th. Maybe a bit too close for comfort, but you can't even get call options that high. Not even remotely that high. This is a really expensive stock too. It's like $7 call options. That's like the cheapest. So you're going to be paying a lot. Yeah, what is OKLO? Yeah, you got it in a good time. You definitely got it in a good time. I'm not even seeing like anything above 75 though. I don't know how you got those options. I guess if you get really short term. But thing is like at this point, I'm not sure the short term is going to work out that well. It's already run like 23%. I mean, if it pushes above 74, 75 right here, maybe it just holds. I would be surprised if it didn't reject here and come back down at least a little bit. That would be surprising to me. So, good trade, but maybe not the best entry. Shoot. I don't know. A 618 retrace would kill it, but it would definitely affect it quite a bit. So, it was a better trade back here where you got it as opposed to just the breakout. If you were willing to take that risk, especially right here when it jumped. That was literally today though, so. Yeah, pretty explosive move. I don't know. It'd probably be a good one to get if it has a like a retrace on the day. Came backwards towards the break here on this candle. Assuming it's done, which it may not be. Yeah, it would be good to see it at maybe 56 or 50, right at that top at 58. Probably be solid. If it comes down that low, it'd have to probably have to re-break here, but it would be like a nice, really nice re-entry if it did that. So this one's kind of a mixed bag for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set an alert above here. If it continues to just go, I'm actually going to set an alert right off the top of this bottom. This actually looks like a really good trade. If it can back up, it's like a perfect, be like a perfect entry. I think it would do well to back up here and hold, but that's just me looking for a good entry. I'm not sure there's other evidence that it has to do that. Maybe this wave length right here, but it does make me feel like that would potentially take a while. See, this one like ran up, backed up a bit. See that? Ran again and then backed up more. And that would be sort of like this if it kind of backed up a bit and then pushed up towards the top and then had like a longer winded kind of a sideways back up towards the top there. What was that? Did that come from the porch?
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing.
Oh my gosh.
Don't see anything though.
Yeah. This would work to reset the RSI too. That would break this though, so let me see. Maybe not. There's a long-winded, like a real long-winded trend right here. So this could have a really long sideways period and have a longer than expected sideways period is what I'm trying to say. So let's see. Is there anything else here that's obviously like a no-go? Maybe this one. Yeah, that's the same kind of argument though. That'd be like if it backed up here and continued. But it hasn't even really hit this top yet, so I'm wondering if it goes a little bit farther and then like backs up. It must make more sense to do that. Go ahead and push over this top and then try to do something like reactive. Yeah, I mean, it's a solid trade. I'm going to just be patient with it. I can't really predict if it runs straight up, but there's nothing I could do about that. But more typically, what we see is that at some point, like this crossed up and over and it's holding on top of that wave. it could continue to hold on top of that wave indefinitely and form kind of like a rising wedge. But most of the time, before it gets to the end, you're going to see it cross over like an S curve like this. So you'd have some kind of a 50-50 cross up like that or something. And then it would be on like the back end of it. And that's just typical. You don't usually see it come in on top of the S curve if you have a good S curve drawn out. Just one of those things. It could, but it's not a normal occurrence unless this is just a really, really bullish ticker. It just holds really strong. Anyways, it's still a good long-term play. Like regardless, I think there's a good chance that it's going to hold pretty well. I'd be, again, cautious about anything out to early July because I think could be a sideways period fairly rapidly now that it's overbought. This ran pretty far while it was overbought. I was just trying to see like the strength of the moves after it became overbought. This too. It has some pretty good both of these have reactions off of the moving average. So you could see like the secondary reaction off the moving average kind of gave it that second life. So this has a secondary move here, and this has a secondary move here. So that might be another way to kind of trade it is like wait to see if there's like a secondary move right here. And I don't know how to predict where that would be, but it looks like as soon as this moving average kind of crossed up and over the top, then the stock typically had some like headwind against it. But even still, this was like flying. So this is a really strong ticker. I mean, that's a lot of strength. I think it could move really far. It's about to be 9:45, so yeah, it's still just like cooking. These are just going. I'll try it out. Maybe easy enough to swing it because they're just really moving right now. Sorry about missing the call out on it. Yeah, I don't know, man. AMC doesn't look super hot to me. Just very much a well, let me put it this way. Anytime the price action on AMC gets this way and it starts acting just really boring, especially at the end of a range, that's typically the first sign that something big is about to happen. But you have to kind of look at what's going on in the overall picture. This has done the same thing twice here, where it's developed a lower low. It's creating an M, developing a lower low, which is kind of a weakness, right? And then it's pushing up and it's failing to advance. It could be a kind of flag where you're going to get a cat-ear to the upside to distribute, but the way it's developing, it just did it again. We need to see a bit of a change of character before I think we can say anything else. One thing I would note here is that on the micro, this doesn't really bode well for us because on the micro analysis, we'll see. I guess this is a tricky one because I'm trying to take something really small and make it bigger. But so like here's what happened on the micro, right? You have this like bottoming right here, and then it makes a lower low, and that's basically what happens right here as well. Bottoming and then lower low. So you get this bottoming structure. Still weirdly looks like that's not a triple bottom, but apparently it is. And then it gets a lower low. And that's very, very similar because you have a secondary push right after that. So you have a buy up push. Doesn't exactly go stronger though because it doesn't break the outermost creek. Like it doesn't jump the creek. So you have this problem of like sort of stagnating. It's not advancing. In fact, this is kind of right on the nose, like stopping. And then you have the same thing here where it came down or it came back up, but it did not advance. So here's where this is kind of running into an issue, right? Is if you look at this and you were to measure out like what just happened, you know, what happened is it came up and it basically generated like what looks like a hook. Now this could be seen as a sort of M cross, weirdly, because it jumps again and advances. We're gonna have to wait and see what the result is after, because I can't really tell right now that it's definitely gonna go down. But so this could be like a sort of a spring on a flag where it's gonna reverse the other way, but it would have to jump this direction and head on up. And I'm on the 15-minute now. I'm really small. But this is why I'm like, oh, this is worth noting, because this is a behavior pattern right now that after kind of making this dip low, and it did come below, you know, this bottom, it has a rise and it does come back up. But if it sells off again, then that lends itself to potentially a larger patterning of the same thing, which would be essentially like this coming down below the floor here, this dropping below the floor and then coming back up, but not breaching the top and then coming down again, which is essentially like the hook. Like it's almost exactly what I expect on the bigger picture, unfortunately, if this is going to hook. Well, that doesn't really bode well then, does it? No, it doesn't. So I don't really want to see that, but it is what it is. We'll see. We'll watch it and see what happens. As opposed to just trying to predict it all in advance, this one might be better just to be a little more reactive on it. Doesn't really change anything with the analysis we've already done. It's kind of the same old, because you have this point of inflection and you've got to make a decision. Now, on the other hand, if this just advances, I think that could give you maybe like a stronger case that this has already changed character. It's not doing the same thing. But certainly this is pretty much what I thought would happen on a halfway point here. If this is a halfway point and it drops again, and I may have overestimated how far that goes. I don't think it needs to go that far. This drops to like 315. Yeah, we don't really want to see that kind of bounce out and then stop. So yeah, I wouldn't say this is particularly great looking, which is kind of a bummer. So GME came back down and made a lower low. I'm still not overly concerned about it just yet. I know you're probably thinking, well, why don't you do the same thing? I mean, I can. I just don't know if it's going to be... well, let me put it this way. If this comes back down, I think, again, you're probably in an SOW kind of state. So that comes from looking at the overall picture and the levels here that were met. You don't really want this to drop below that support that was made here back in May on the 15th, that area. That's typically like a weakness. So anything else is okay. You know, we haven't done anything else yet, but anything else would be okay. I say that, but you know, this is also something that strikes me as a bit of a weakness. So it's like, how do you know, well, it is what it is. You know, I don't know what to say. It's not really the best way to put it, but you just take it for what you think it is. There's a couple of parallels that are running up here that really don't look right on the extended hours. I'm going to put it back on regular trading hours. It's possible that we're going beneath those in order to kind of buy back in. But at the end of the day, like I'm looking backwards at these creeks that were made. And though you certainly could have some different opinions about them, in terms of where it is. This is sort of the deepest right here. What an ugly chart. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hits. Then none of them are aligned with each other. That's unusual. That's really low. That's 26. But again, that's the 25 level right here. So worst case scenario, this sells down there. I'm still not buying it. Not yet. That it's going to do that big drop. It's already dropping, Booksy. You're wrong. Yeah, I know. I know what it looks like. I'm not blind. I'm aware. Get rid of some of these like more redundant markers so I don't have all this stuff on the chart right now. This zone is still critical. We'll keep that for now. Get rid of this one. This is speculative anyways, so I might just kind of dim this a bit. And I'm thinking this might be a bit too steep. So let's see if we can figure this out. What I actually might do for a moment is get rid of everything just for a minute so I can see it better. It definitely looks like a head and shoulder, but that's okay. The thing about head and shoulders, and I know you guys are going to say like that a head and shoulder is going to lead to a breakdown, but the thing about it is that sometimes when they develop like this, like yes, there's a head and shoulder there. I think we already addressed this before, but like the measurement for that is going to be pretty close probably to what an S curve would measure anyways, like typically. So if we took this down, you'd be like, oh, it's going to go to 2683, right? All right. Probably gives us some evidence of, I don't know, like a backup to that level. I think that was one of the ones we had on the chart a few minutes ago. Or maybe even using these more locally. You can say it gets down there like right now. That's a sign of weakness, isn't it, Booksy? Well, yeah, it is. I think on the overall picture, there's reasons that I have that there, but it's also like it makes it difficult because then you have to go back and look at this as like a reactive kind of a hook, and it doesn't really lead you to necessarily like great things, you know. It could be very much a shallow bounce, so on and so forth. And then you have the question of like how long that takes, so on and so forth. But there's a second, I wouldn't say it's more appealing, but there's a second participation option here and how this navigates this particular chart and like where you would want to go, and that is the bottom as a, and this is a weird one, but this does happen in the market where you get this kind of bottoming motion. I don't really know what to call it other than like, yeah, I don't know. There's like a W bottom. There was one called like a tent pole bottom, like that, but that's still like a W. And I've seen it called different things because at the end of the day, it goes right back out. I honestly think that this is one of the weirder ones because it looks like a bearish continuation. Like that's what that would look like to me, you know, if it were coming down and it hit that low. But I've seen it enough that at this point I'm like, I think what we might be experiencing sometimes is that bottom that we talk about, which is more or less like this. It's pretty much the same thing. It just has the features are slightly different, but it has pretty much the exact same result. So I'm curious if like sometimes we're not witnessing like an actual regular bottom. You think that we're like dying. Now this looks kind of bearish divergent because you can see that the shoulders are kind of pivoting down, whereas the price action's moving up. And I feel you there. I wonder though. Speaking of cup and handle. So this looks like a bowl, but it ultimately is not a handle. It's too far down. This, however, could be considered a cup and handle. Even though it goes over the top, which isn't like the greatest, you got to be a little bit flexible on these things. It's long enough, I think it works. It has to be at least a few weeks. And this was pretty long. So let's see how long it was. 155 days, that's plenty of time. It's U-shaped enough. I would say it's almost too V-shaped, but it's probably going to end up being like that. What is this intro trajectory? 39 degrees. Oh, can't do it that way. $39.5. Yeah, that kind of works. That's like an inversion of that. This is such an ugly looking top, if it's a top though. Yeah, so the cup and handle, this would be like a 50% retrace to that particular marker here. So we're looking at this from a different perspective. And then that's the same target that we got for the head and shoulder at the top. Certainly a possibility. I think that's too low because of other things, but it obviously would be okay as a bigger pattern. If it did that and held here, it would have to hold and then break back out. And then you'd have a potential, and I'm not going to use the, well, I should probably use the tippy top. I should take that back. It just hasn't happened yet, but break over the top. Yeah, that's about 50. Which somebody else had said before, and I said I didn't think it was going to get to 50. It kind of depends on where you measure from. So that, if you were using just a pure, like, Bulkowski method, this wouldn't be ready yet. In fact, it kind of looked like you wouldn't get out of here until maybe that July 11th area. Perhaps, unfortunately. And I don't know how else to draw it, but it'd be something like that. If it were to do all of that, that's a lot. Yeah, but you said, I know what I said. I know what I said. The thing is that a cup and handle doesn't have to go down 50%. It's not a requirement. That's just kind of like a maximum, right? So this is still like an extreme move. And then there's reasons why on the bigger picture I thought that might not happen. And that this might be bullish and more of a shallow S-curve. So as an S-curve goes, that would be sort of the end all be all, I suppose, for it. So I'm redrawing this. I know you guys are like, well, you just had all this stuff on the chart. I know. I'm redoing it, retooling it. Something like that. Because I wanted to see if I could make that more accurate, but It's still pretty shallow because it's not a full rotation there. And then I'm going to make this as more exact. Actually think this is probably what would be in view here, if that's the case. So here's what a shallow S-curve would probably do, is that you'd probably get some kind of reactive bounce to like near 30, that area we talked about earlier, but it wouldn't go, it would reject. I say probably because that's not a guarantee. Hooks are weird. They could be that literal, like right to the dot. Sometimes they don't get that far, like they're weaker than expected. They may only come up to like 2950 or something. That was the zone that we had talked about earlier, as we were saying that, you know, if we put the other one back on, as messy as it is, that area right here is that resistance marker. This zone right there, right up top. So that still seemed pretty likely if it didn't go. Again, this is saying that this is not a shallow S-curve, it's a full S-curve. You'd probably see a reaction here, and then it'd head back down towards the bottom. So I do something like this. And then the rest of it, I don't want to say it's history, but it's kind of like, then you're just walking it out like you normally would. So this would end up being like there. Specifically going from this part here, not the tippy top. I'm not really sure why I did that, but I think I did it because of these mid-levels. I was thinking about that might be where they're measuring from, or a proper measurement might be measured from. And then if it works, it works. Yeah. Yeah, this would definitely be a way to keep it like long-term stagnant if you wanted to not move the stock at all and like kind of crush it. You could do that. Probably could even wait till like, again, like the last minute. That doesn't seem fun, Booksy. No, doesn't. That's putting a lot of faith in a pattern at that point that would look kind of weak to me, but if that were the goal to get it to like 48, that does work pretty well. And you've got a halfway point right here off the top. It doesn't really meet anything, but it's there. It doesn't have to go that far, but you could have a, yeah, kind of a build out right off of 29 again. The thing is like, this makes sense to me anyways. I had the same level, the same couple levels right here. Because looking back at these support regions, it's the same spots. This is the one we already marked off. Yeah, OKLO is just going. That's all right. I bought it. We'll see what happened to it. I don't know if I'm going to hold it very long. It's like way overbought. This typically is where it starts selling off. But not a bad trade for a swing. A quick 20%. Not bad. Yeah, I don't think I can hold it anymore. I gotta like sell it while it's hot. It's dropping quick. Hot potatoes. Nice. Well, GME can't drop below 26, and I'm not suggesting that, so I'm not really sure where you're going with that, but where that came from. This is 27.15, so I don't think GME is in a necessarily a bad spot though. Like I'm just looking at the contrary, and inside of me is just looking at the downplay. Now, this is an estimation of timing, but there's so many things that could happen. You know, when you look at trajectory this is a very fast trajectory. So for me to say like, oh, it goes down that slow and doesn't leave fast, well, that's kind of true. It's kind of not true. You know, like this trajectory would have to be met at some point. So in some ways, it's like I believe that. So in some ways, this is just the way that the market typically trades. It'd probably be more similar like this, you know, where this is up here in July, maybe even at the halfway point. So this is just a potential. This hasn't happened. This isn't set in stone. The other option here was a shallow S-curve. A shallow S-curve is exactly what it sounds like. You don't finish the S-curve. Instead, you reverse. And the requirements for this are very simple. You need to make a higher high here. You need to hold the support. So you need to push above the top. We've already talked about this. This is at 31.10. You need to push up, hold that higher support, and then advance. And then you've got a pretty decent chance that you're going to move all the way up pretty much now. And I mean, it could be a little bit slower than that, but there's a good chance that you're going to move up very rapidly if it does something like that. So I'm not sitting here saying like this is definitely going to happen. And a lot of times I do these two extremes that ends up being somewhere in the middle, you know, and I can't really predict that timing being like that, but it is what it is. I'm just looking at, this is a head and shoulder. The head and shoulder target goes down to like 27.20, which is lower than I wanted it to go. I called it an SOW range, and I think it's problematic for a couple reasons, but I'll leave it at that. This goes down to like roughly $27. Okay. It is a creek cross test. It wouldn't be the end of the world. It looks like a bit of a rotation here to go back up and test. It is a 50% retrace on a cup and handle, on a macro cup and handle here, big picture cup and handle. It's the head and shoulder target locally as well. But there is a chance, and it is a chance, and I don't want to say it's not going to happen just because I'm still thinking that this could be a shallow cup and handle, in which case this is exactly where it needs to be. And we talked about it yesterday, like it's going to be in this little pocket region right here. And if you can find that support without breaking through certain levels, I think you're going to be in a really good position to advance back to the upside. And it won't take much to get you back over, but it has to be obviously implemented by some strength, right? Well, how do you know which is which? You just don't. I don't know what to tell you guys. I wish there was like an easy win button, but there isn't. All I know is that if the cat ear doesn't work here, you're either going to go into, which is what happened, it failed to make a higher high. I said that yesterday repeatedly. I said it yesterday. I was a broken record about it. If it fails to make a higher high, and AMC and GME have failed to make higher pushes on these secondary motions, then you're in the mode of S-curve, and the only real recourse that you have, the only bullish option that you have at that point right here that doesn't just capitulate and head back down even in a hook is what I call a shallow S-curve. That's just me calling it something, okay? What we usually see on that shallow S-curve, and I'm looking at it right here, there's a marker right there that I could use as an indication, is that there's a trajectory creek that's not met. It's not like a cross down here, right? And it's never like really, it doesn't come back to it right away. And I don't necessarily think this is like an ice level. It could be, but it's really more of a, I call it like the cat ear line. Sometimes I'll call it a cross. That marker right there becomes very important because if you come back up 99% of the time, and I'm being very serious about that, you actually meet at that marker with the intersection. So if it's going to do what I call the shallow S-curve, almost all the time, it will actually be this triangulation right here. Because this generates a triangulation that gets you over like kind of two birds with one stone moment, right? And you end up with an SOS in the range after like a spring. This would have to be a spring, a deep one, right? But you'd end up with an SOS here, and it would push up and intersect that triangulation and jump that cross as well. That gives you momentum then to like drive the price back towards the buying climax is typically where we see. But that's not an every time kind of thing. Like it's a once in a while thing that happens when there's a spring action that's essentially like a bear trap, right? And it's the shallow S curve that's reversed. So what I was hoping for this morning is we would open low down here. I said it yesterday. I was like, well, it looks kind of bearish, but I'm hoping that what happens is we open low and then just kind of rip to the upside. Now, it's been an hour and a half. We haven't seen any kind of reversal yet. We're not looking particularly great. At this point, is it likely going to happen? I'm shrugging my shoulders because I think that you've lost a little bit of that possibility in that the reaction hasn't happened yet. Now, you might be saying, well, it's only been an hour and a half. I know. But this is the kind of thing that when you're trapping somebody after earnings or report, you don't really want it to take all day. You know, it's typically like a pretty fast turnaround. The market did have some bullish action, but ultimately, like, I'm not really convinced it's going to be super long-lived. We'll see. I think it could have like an extension up here, and clearly GME is not taking part in that right in this second. So the other potential here is that this is a full S-curve, a fuller S-curve. That could go really, really low, right? This is still shallow, but this is a stronger target. So I'm seeing a lot of evidence of both here. I think you could have a case that it's not going to get up here till later. This was the approximate intersection. So there's certainly a possibility that this takes till July. I mean, I hate to say it, but there's certainly a possibility it takes till July to get back over 35. If we do not see that reversal, and I was stressing that so much yesterday and the day before, that had to make that reversal right here. So yeah, I've seen it before where the head and shoulder is really more of like a bottoming structure. It's the right side of a wave, and it is 1 and then 2. So this is the left side, and then the right side often is that unwinding, and typically comes back down and then goes. And even if it does go low here, I'd probably still look at it the same way. You know, I'd still see this as like, okay, this is this shape, and then we've got this shape on this side, because ultimately, like, that's the way I would see the wave structure. But look at it. You don't need me to tell you that that doesn't look particularly great. I mean, it's kind of obvious. So I hate to say that the hope here was that it was a bear trap, but that is the main thing. And that's what I put my money on yesterday. I said, I think that this goes down and it actually has more strength than expected and returns the other way based on some of the other stuff that I was seeing with timing. And it had to be today by about noon, I think, based on the timing setup. Now, AMC was a little bit different because it has a slightly different setup, but there were some similarities here as well. And right now, AMC is just chopping. It's not particularly doing anything interesting. You know, it hasn't solidified a direction yet. In a similar way, could this have a drop, you know, to a new low or potentially even just slightly below the previous low? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to. you can see it's holding up right now on top of a long-term downtrend. This is kind of one of the major creek bodies. I think this goes from the two previous peaks. So this is a really important one. It's certainly a place where you could see capitulation. You know, if this is a rotational symmetry, just like here you got this kind of big drop, this could have a similar motion down. I'm not saying it's going to be 1-to-1, but certainly you could make that argument that this is where it's going to drop. And it's going to be really nasty and go down to like 290s. And 290s have been on the stage for quite a while, so I would not, again, be super surprised. I should probably make that. Yeah, this is this one right here. You can't see it on the screen, but that's where the middle is. It's like right at 350. That'd be a better one to put than 289. 298 seems a little stronger. 296, this area. That's the equivalent move for AMC, okay, that you would see for GME if it does this and goes low. So we're screwed. Well, I don't know. It is what it is. Yes, this head and shoulder broke down. Yes, the breakdown would lead you that low unless it reversed back above the neckline, right? But in order for this to kind of work out, it has to do that like ASAP. I hate it for us because I thought it was going to kind of drop and then reverse early. I think this needs to have that big move up, but I gotta be honest, at this point, if we don't see it like today or tomorrow, I'm not sure that I want to say it's going to happen, because it needs to be like the timing for this. Man, this is going to be really ugly if it drops, y'all, because the timing for this needs to be spot on, and it ends in like 2 hours. So it's going to be over soon. It really is. It's going to be nasty if it drops. I wonder if they're using the same method, like measuring out from that instead. I bet they are. That might be why that S-curve goes too far. The first one that I did. It's measuring from like this mid-zone here around 340, not 350. But they did an extension higher than 390, which is really where that level is. Drop zone is. So I wonder if that's what they're using here. Just like on GME, seemed like they were using that drop at like 3450, not the actual top for that measurement, which is strange. I know. I don't know if it was intuition or what made me do that, but I just thought it looked visually, I was like, that doesn't look right. I think they're using that, the actual support level, not the top, which is kind of weird. So, yep. So if this drops, then, and I don't know, could go up first even and still drop. But if this drops, I think you're going to have a pretty nasty drop today. Like, it could drop over 10% today. What would be the news to cause that to happen, Booksy? I don't know, and I don't care. I don't know. You know? I don't know. The market has had some trouble digesting the lack of a China trade deal and the GME earnings is one piece of news. There's also, CPI that was better than expected, but maybe that was already priced in, Don't let it drop. I'm just telling you where the target is. That's where the target is. If it drops, that's where it's going to go. I thought about this as that as well. This looks like it's weirdly like similar in terms of a head and shoulder, isn't it? Y'all like, I wouldn't know. I can't see. It is. It's the same head and shoulder right here. We can get rid of everything, do it again, just to see the head and shoulder again. I don't know. I don't find that to be particularly concerning, though. I think maybe that's what's causing me to not be as concerned as perhaps I should be. Maybe I should be concerned, and I'm just being way too relaxed about it. Yeah, I don't know. It's a visually I can see it, and usually on the shouldering motion, there are creek drops, so that is happening. We're not meeting any of them though. They're kind of ignoring them. Maybe it's this instead. Yeah, this is weird. This doesn't make any sense. Why would we do that? Why are you doing this, Booksy? So when you go off the right side, there's always like an expansion. Almost always there's an expansion. And then you get to the top, and if that expansion starts breaking down, you find that those shoulder markers start working as usually it's like this kind of a thing where you have a walk down, and the next one walks down, and it's another shoulder, sort of like that. And I'm seeing some evidence of that, but it's kind of messy. It's not really working how I would normally do it, because I would usually do it from this point, and that doesn't really work. You can't even, like, that's not even close to correct. So it's very odd. It's kind of doing it, it's kind of not. This comes from the master fractal, like way long time ago. I talked about this before. So usually this ends up being kind of a widening to the upside. There's typically like again, a shouldering motion on the left side. Sometimes this is a bit of a triangle. It can be a bit of an inverted motion where you get a wedge sometimes. If it's extremely tight, you might get a wedge that literally looks like an inversion of the other. I'm not really seeing that right here. I mean, it kind of walked out sideways if it did. So it's a little more like a U, which is not my favorite. It really does to me. It looks more and more like we might get an up thrust and then just kind of die. You know, I know that I'm trying to be as optimistic as I can about the possibility that this is like a shallow S curve and all that jazz. But to me, it's like the more I stare at it, the more I'm like, this probably made more sense as an up thrust. And then the alternative is just a straight up S curve down, where you're just kind of going through here. And it goes pretty low. Like I said, probably about 298, I would guess. So when we're looking at it from that point of view, and I was trying to be as simple as possible, let me consider this. I'm trying to think through it really fast because I actually have to leave really soon. So I have a meeting I need to get to. I'm trying to think through it really fast. this might matter, but I don't think it's that important just yet. It may be more like this guy, weirdly enough. Since that was also used here, for whatever reason, instead of using the low there, it didn't use that little wick down. I find that to be very strange. Oof. It kind of breathes new life into what's going on right this second. And there is a bit of a widening going on too. Right here. Wonderful pattern, Booksy. But too late. Yeah, that's probably the walk down. So let's make this like a different color. That doesn't match. I don't know. It's starting to turn into like the same thing as the GME chart in this regard. And the timing of it is, again, kind of horrible. It would be today. This looks like more like tomorrow, the way I drew it here, because the cross is like right there instead. It just depends on, I guess, how you draw it. The previous one, it looked more like noon today. This one looks more like 10:30 tomorrow. That's maybe more realistic. So it's not like a straight up 10% drop. It's very low. Take us back down to there. So that's actually the 280 level. The other one that I did was the 298, which may make more sense to me. Either one of those is fine. It really just depends how you measure the box that I'm drawing. And then timing moderately different, again, depending on how you measure the box. So those would be your two markers of likely targets. Now, the thing is like AMC already had this vibe going on. Like it had this problem of like continually making lower lows and not checking it, like not checking out the tops. It's just going up and failing to, translate into an actual breakout. So it has already had this kind of setup building. Part of me was like, well, there could be a widening here. I mean, it looks like a widening of sorts. But it still leads you down low. It still leads you to like 308 if it drops, right? And I've had some markers on the chart to kind of keep that in mind. I may need to come down pretty low. Actually, it looks like 307. Move it there. Let's move this one to 325. And this has to be over the top. It's the same deal. Like, you could have a drop here that's considered a shallow S-curve, is like a bear trap, right? You think it's going to go down. They think it's going to go down to like $3 or something, 250. Instead, it inverts and it goes the other way, and then you'd have to have a build out here. But more and more, it looks like even if that happened, we may get stuck and not go above 390. Now, that's consistent with what I thought might happen there if it gets stuck at 390. I kind of got rid of that on my chart. I had one that goes up to here as like a cat ear. I don't know why I got rid of it, but I got rid of it. If you went back like a week ago, I would have had that on the chart, but I didn't. I don't have it now for some reason. So there was this idea that it could get stopped right there. So I had marked this off as a possibility that could happen. I think I was just trying to declutter and reduce the complexity of it. But that is certainly a possibility if there's a cat ear there. That's what it would probably look like. And it would be a rejection off of that 390 creek, sort of like a second test. And then it would probably be dead. I mean, and the thing is like, even looking at this now, I'm like, yeah, if it went up to 388, that doesn't really do anything except maybe back test the top, kind of like this did, right, when this came up. And that might make sense. I don't know. If you measure this out from the back, maybe let's do that. Let's try that and see what happens. It looks like it's way off. Yeah, I don't know. See, that looks like that shoulder already happened to me. But head and shoulders are weird. They can be a little bit off timing. They're supposed to be pretty similar. Like usually they happen in a very symmetrical way. In which case, I would say this shoulder already happened here. Like that's the same shoulder. Because it already back tested this marker. It didn't back test this marker. Oh, maybe that's the goal. Maybe it's about this marker then. This one hasn't been checked again. There was kind of a double tap on it. This doesn't advance. So timing wise, this makes sense as this. And if you dip down here, this would be like your shallow S curve. You get a little bit of a spring because it goes slightly below the bottom. And then it propels itself up. You get the pump into basically this end of this week. That would work. All right, so that's a good shallow S-curve option. That's similar to what we're saying here, or what we're saying about the potential here anyways. Though I'm not exactly sure how far this would go if it just only ran till Friday. So that's still on the table. It's not gone. And the drop would have to be a drop off of this area. So I'm thinking that we actually got that pretty right, that this would be some kind of meltdown by Thursday or Friday. It's very much a direct drop if we look at it very literally. Both of these look good. No, it's a 10%. That's a big drop. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a huge drop. It's bad for AMC. It's not as bad for GME because the levels are just different. That's 10% if you go from like where we were at the top. But if you go from where we are now, it's only like 6%. Whereas if we go from where we are now, it's like 10%. So, yeah. I mean, you can see why that would be desirable as a backup. And I think the generalized kind of, again, what is being checked is actually the same thing. Because if you look at this and you see this as kind of just an extension of this main wave here going back to January 2025, this year, right, through March, et cetera, though AMC's markup's different, it is a similar setup. This is January right here. So you can see this as a very similar like motion. I mean, it's very similar. I'm not going to be drawing that perfectly, but that's exactly the same move, guys. It really is a difference of like pennies, but probably like the low end here and the top there is better. This. Still, same region. So it may look really bad because it is a huge drop. Don't get me wrong. And then we got to remember like on balance volume. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's other things going on. It's not by itself. So we'd have a lot of other things we could look at here. So like this isn't very controversial to me because I was talking about how I don't really know that this is necessitating like another pump. In reality, you could easily see this hooking here and just dying, you know? And then this measurement already finished. There's not really much else to it. If you look at the waveform pattern here, this is done. This finished. They're even. The rest of it would probably be downside. But because there was a lack of movement in on balance, we talked about, this hasn't even done any kind of crossover yet. We talked about that possibility of driving the other way. And I'm going to have to stop in about a minute here, unfortunately. So this was on the chart for a little while, and I had the at least some kind of an idea that we probably should measure out, right, the 50-50 here, which we did. And as best we could tell, again, today around noon, maybe into tomorrow morning. But that was sort of like the halfway point on this walk down. It's kind of hard to see it. I know, because it's a blue line on this. Maybe I should change the color on this. It'd probably make a big difference if it was just light blue even. There you go. But you can see, like, we were thinking about, well, if it backed up and it dropped low, it might drop to this region at like 3.8. That would be back to here. Still possible. That would be like an S curve down. You could have a reaction back up that's more or less like a hook after it drops. That's the same principle we were just talking about. Like, why would you necessarily go all the way back up? And then the main option that we talked about is like, well, this could be a reversal pattern that leads you to an actual higher high, and this would be more in line with what we see in 2020. But I've said it repeatedly, like, I don't think it's necessary. If you look at the numbers, it just really has to do with liquidity, and I can't answer that question. Because as high as it is right now, the 50-50 down through this middle gets you to the bottom area. The difference is like what this does, I suppose, on the bigger picture to certain things, but I'm not going to go into that right now. I don't have time for that right this second. So at the moment, I'm not like sure that this needs to go back up. And frankly, we've marked off these levels already. It does seem right to me. Like, you could have a hook here, you could have it drop down and bounce still. And that would play into this idea of a drop and a bounce here that may look good, or that this is already about to dropped a little bit. It's going to do a little bit of a dip, but not actually fall through, right? So it drops down maybe below the previous bottom, maybe not, but it drops a bit. And then, because I don't really care, right? It's just drop. It hits this marker somewhere, and then it goes back up. That would look more like support, right? Notice, like, this is the 4 hour. So if it dropped the 4 hour moving average, it's going to be right at the same zone here at 320. So I don't think we're wrong to estimate a possible like 7 to 10% drop if it goes through there. I think we're correct that could be the case. But if it reverses, I'm really just looking back at that top again. You guys will want to watch that 362 level really carefully. That's where it needs to push above. And then you watch the backup could go as low as like 350. GME, it's kind of the same thing. You just got the same exact setup here. They're both starting to look almost identical. They're just slightly different. So the shallow S curve has to come back above this marker here. HIMS, we should check that out. That's like the erectile dysfunction drug. There's going to be a lot of jokes about that if that thing runs. Anyways, so shallow S curve has to make a higher high, has to jump the creek right here, right here. That's it. I think you guys can handle it. I think it'll be okay without me for a while. I may not be able to come back today. We'll see. Maybe after lunch, but I'll have to take some time off because I got a meeting this morning, and then I'll be back. I don't know why I always do this to myself. I always schedule like meetings on like Wednesdays and like middle of the day, but it is what it is. Yeah. So we're watching for hooks here. We're watching for cat ears, obviously. We're watching for that bigger upthrust to possibly happen. But we want to see if it's going to continue. In order to continue, it has to do that jump and run up. Even still, just be very aware of the possibility of these stopping points. For AMC, it's like the 363 and then up to 390. For GME, it's 3110 and then right up above at 33. And I'm not going to talk too much more about that. The top's a possibility as well. But if it's going to just do a reactive move to the upside and not go any further, that's probably where it would stop. So if AMC goes to like 390, GME may only go to like 33. Those would be the equivalent values. Does that make sense? I know it looks like a cluster cuss of lines here, like I'm trying to catch it all. But since I'm going to be gone for a little while, I want to go ahead and show you those numbers. This is just the two areas I would watch the most careful. Like I would be really, really aware of those two as possibilities of stopping points, and then these two as possibilities of stopping points. And of course, the hook, right? I didn't delete the other chart. I just hit it for a bit. But the hook was right here. It's like if you go up high and then you drive back through, that's not good. That's just a head fake. That's a bear trap, or excuse me, a bull trap. Okay? All right. Well, I got to go. So you guys have a good one. I will talk to you maybe after lunch. I'll try to get back if there's something to look at. We're not done here, but it's not. We have to see something here. We have to see either like a reaction up that fails or a reaction up that doesn't fail. And then we can probably figure out the next step in terms of down versus up. Yeah, I don't know. This would be a crazy bear trap if it is. All right. We'll see you all in a bit.